Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my listening log update for October 2019. We have 12 albums to get through today, so let's dive on in. I got some requests to knock out and some new current stuff and some catch-up. It's a good rounded out set of records to talk about. Now I've been following Chelsea Wolfe for a while now. Abyss is when I caught wind of her music, and I really enjoyed her gothic sound with a lot of noise and harshness to it. But I was very curious about Birth of Violence because it was touted as this acoustically driven, more pulled back record, and I personally think that she pulls it off more often than not on this record. Really, the weaknesses do come from the fact that it's more stripped back. I think that when it hits pretty solidly. I like the way this thing starts. I love the opener for this record, the Motherlode, and I like that it kind of has this kind of fullness to the sound, and I feel like it carries through, like on tracks like When Anger Turns to Honey and Preface to a Dream Play, which feel a little more serene and lush. Her vocals really shine on those songs, and I even like that they don't completely lose the noisiness, like on Deranged for Rock and Roll, but I do feel like this record kind of plays through all of its cards by the end of the runtime a couple times. You know, I feel like it would have done more to have more of the band more prevalent throughout a lot of the release. I feel like a lot of this record kind of plods along a little bit. Not to say that her writing isn't still strong, because it's still there, it's still potent, there's still some darkness in the lyrics here. But I feel like the experiment here doesn't fully work across the entire runtime of the record. I do like how somber it is. I think it's fitting for the season that we're in. I think it's a really good fall record, and I don't think it's the worst thing I've heard here this year, nor do I think it's mediocre by any stretch of the imagination. I do like a lot of the guitar lines here. I do think that they are very somber and gothic in a true sense, and I really like that about it. But I do think that some of the edge, or I could have used a little more of the edge that set her apart from a lot of her contemporaries, or a lot of people in the scene now that are doing this very lush, somber tinged stuff. But I honestly really enjoy this thing. I think it's solid. I think if you like folksier music, you would actually enjoy this more than her other releases. I just personally really like when she gets nitty and dirty and gritty. That's one of the things I loved about His Spun. I thought it was really cool that she got even more doomier. But I don't think this was a wasted experiment, and I think that if she incorporated her band more into this, she would get a more fuller experience or full use out of this style. I'm personally giving this a 7. I think it's solid. I think that if you want something good to spin this fall season as we transition into colder months, you could do worse than listening to Birth of Violence. This is a request by Slinging Slasher, somebody that has been spamming all of Rate Your Music with this record. This is kind of a Rate Your Music-centric album. Cowtools by Cowtools. And it's a very lo-fi record. It's very lo-fi. A lot of the sounds that aren't guitars feel very MIDI-centric. They feel produced in a very haphazard sort of way. This whole record kind of feels kind of slapdash together, and that's not a bad thing. I like haphazard releases. You know, I checked out the Dorkcore release, and there's some stuff on there that definitely feels a little more raw, and there's definitely a rawness here, but I feel like there isn't much that's substantive, and I think that's kind of the point. This record feels very loose and improvisational, which again, I don't mind improvisational music. But because this record is so long, it kind of overstays its welcome. Like, this thing is almost an hour long, and while there's not much in here in terms of songs, I think that's kind of the point. And I know that this person just kind of wanted to get... I don't know if the person that requested it is the person that made. I don't know if they are the person from Cowtools, but this record just is a nothing album. Like, it feels like it was made to suffice a meme of some sort. I think that I dig a lot of the guitar work that's here. I like the kind of lo-fi edge to a lot of the production. That's not my problem with the album. It's more that there's nothing here. Like, I've sat through this record, and it's a chore to sit through because there's a lot of just kind of again, haphazardly thrown together songs. It doesn't feel so much like a musician improvising. It feels more like a guy who likes music just making something nonsensical. There's a lot of times where songs just feel like they end for no reason. There's really nothing here in terms of structure. It's fine. I feel like if you buy into the meme, you'll enjoy it, or if you buy into the joke, you'll enjoy it. I liked some of the grooves on like Wiggle Worms. I liked the edge on Return to Mozambique. I liked the sounds in Coffee in the Dark. I think a lot of the auto-tune vocals that are on here also kind of set it back. They feel more like a joke usage than like an aesthetic choice. And I don't know. I think it's neat that this is the embodiment of we're in an age where people can just make something like this, but it's not something that I would say I wholly love. I think that if you want to hear something really loose in structure and experimental, you'll enjoy it. But even as a fan of experimental music, I feel like people who make experimental music do it with purpose, and I feel like this was made purposelessly, which is, again, fine. People are able to do whatever they want, but if you want to talk about it in a critical spectrum, in a critical discussion, it's just a joke record. I'm giving this a 5 out of 10 because I respect the work that went into this. I respect the musicianship that's here. I think that there is some talent in the midst here from a compositional and a musician perspective, but I just would have liked to have seen something to tighten it around. You know, even a record like Dorkcore had a central theme amidst its nonsensical nature. That record's biggest folly was that it was too long. This is just kind of nothing, but it's fine. I'm not gonna hate on this record because I feel like there's no need to. There's nothing here that's inherently wrong. It's just nothing is right either. Hopefully that's what you wanted, slinging slasher from me. I don't know what whoever made this intent was when putting it into a critical analysis field, but I hope you got what you were looking for, buddy. Keep doing what you're doing, because I think you can make some more really weird shit. And I like weird shit, and I like some of the weird shit here, but it's just really meandering. Kind of like this review.
Made me run like 280, had a couple babies, 270, yeah, but
I, like a lot of the internet, was waiting with bated breath for Danny Brown to release his follow-up to Atrocity Exhibition when he announced he was in the studio late last year. This has been one of my most anticipated records of the year, and I think that You Know What I'm Saying is another fantastic notch on Danny Brown's belt. My favorite song in Atrocity Exhibition was Tell Me What I Don't Know. I love the very laid-back approach to it that had a really nice story-driven element, or storytelling element to it, and I like that he took that and made a whole album of that. You know, I think that the Q-Tip as a executive producer makes a lot of sense. I like the more jazzy, nuanced sound that coats a lot of this record. Tracks like Savage Nomad and Shine feel a lot more like classic New York boom bap, like jazz rap influenced stuff, like shit from Aesop Rock's Labor Days, or even old school Tribe cuts. I loved the singles that dropped from this thing, like Dirty Laundry and 3 Tears. I think tracks like 3 Tears and Belly of the Beast keep that kind of unnerving nature that's been in Danny Brown's music in the past there, but in a much more subdued form. I think 3 Tears is a great shining moment as well. I love Peggy's beat. I love Run the Jewels on it. It seems like a normal Run the Jewels feature, but Run the Jewels continue to deliver excellence, so, you know. But speaking of Peggy, I think he's great on Negro Spiritual. I think Obong JR is fantastic on Belly of the Beast. And while the title track gets a little repetitive, I think his presence on that is also very good. And I even think, You Know What I'm Saying, continues the prospects of the album's kind of mission statement greatly, even if in a much more upfront manner. this is just a very, very good record. You know, I think that it shows a lot of Danny's growth as a person, and it does a lot to solidify him as a great in the genre. I know some may see this as a step down because it's not as ambitious sonically as Atrocity Exhibition, and I would agree, but I don't think it's that much of a setback, because I think while it's not as weird and experimental, it keeps the fundamentals there, and it excels and delivers and expands upon ideas that Danny has done in doses in his music in the past. I think that this is one of the best hip-hop records of the year, and Danny Brown continues to be one of the best guys doing it. His pen game is a lot more on the forefront on this record, and that shows that he's not just a party guy. He's a dude with a lot of wisdom to bestow and a great perspective to give. This is an 8 out of 10 record, easily an 8 out of 10 record. Fantastic album. Again, one of the best hip-hop records of the year, absolutely bar none. So I actually threw this record on the drive to North Carolina with Crash, and I've listened to it a couple times since then, but just to give you an idea of how little Crash and I were into it, we did not really care to listen to it. Like, we spun the whole thing. I could tell you, even in that first listen, I was not excited to sink my teeth into this thing. I think that it's fine. If you like the more prog-centric Opeth, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it. There's a lot of wankery solos, like on Dignity, and I think it's the Garroter. There's some sense of macabre and darkness in the lyrics, but a lot of the atmospheres on this thing really remind me of Ghost, who's a band that's doing this sound better than Opeth. You know, I don't mind that this is a little more proggier, like it's still a very prog Opeth record. A lot of that real darkness and grit is gone. A lot of the guitar production is clean, which if you're into that, you're going to like it here. The vocals are very clean, which if you like that, you're going to like it here. There's a huge sense of grandiose with a lot of the production. It's very big and bold, and if you like that, you're going to like this. But I personally think that this sound, it feels played out for Opeth. It feels like Opeth playing the numbers. I think it's neat that they did like an English, Swedish version to really let people get into the story or the concepts and themes of the record. But I think the concepts and themes of the record are done better by other bands of the genre. I think that it's fine as a fan of classic Opeth. I prefer classic Opeth. I don't think prog Opeth has put out, you know, terrible records, but this is certainly one of the lower parts of their discography to me personally. It feels like the band's on autopilot. And again, if I'm going to listen to spooky rock and metal, I'm going to listen to Ghost because I think they capture an aesthetic a lot more potently than Opeth does, at least in Cauda Venenum. I'm giving this a 5. It's a very mediocre record from its production to its playing, to me personally. It's just nothing new in the Opeth camp. And I don't know. They're a great live band, and they still rock it live, but in the studio, I just don't think they fully delivered this time around. So I think it's interesting that this version of Lana Del Rey is seemingly just very critically adored. And not just this album, but this just seems to be the apex of this version of Lana, and I would agree. While I've never really talked about her albums specifically on the channel, I've been following her loosely since Born to Die, and I don't like a lot of her earlier stuff because I think that the writing, in tandem with the inconsistent commitment to the aesthetic, didn't work for me. I know it doesn't work for others in the critical realm, but while I don't think she's been the worst thing to stem from music at all, I think it's neat that she did help forge a movement in music. I just have never been fully sold on her writing. I also have never really... I don't think that all of her infusions of this old school style with more of a hip-hop sensibility worked in some of her older work. I think that she kind of started to turn around with a lot of the critical masses. People think it was Honeymoon. I personally think Lust for Life was better than the rest of her stuff beforehand. But Norman fucking Rockwell is hands down her best record. Even though she covers one of my least favorite bands in Doin' Time, her version of Doin' Time isn't fucking bad. I actually dig her version of a Sublime song. And I think that it works in context of a lot of the lyrical themes on this record. This record feels like a much more mature release. I love the writing on this. Not even just the title track and Mariner's Apartment Complex, which are pretty heavily regarded as some of her best work, and I would agree. I actually really like the more experimental instrumental passages that coat Venice Bitch. I like the bluntness in the writing on a lot of this record, not in like a, again, tongue-in-cheek kind of sassy way. I like that Lana really just becomes a much more humanistic writer. You know, I feel like she's past burying a lot of her lyrics in this image, and it feels much more reflective of her life now. I think the lush atmosphere on a lot of this works for the sounds, or for the lyrics she's writing, much more than it did her earlier stuff. I think that the commitment to the aesthetic much more so on here than on other releases is what makes this a better record to me as well. And I really think she does a good job at blending her sort of aesthetic with modern ideals like on Cinnamon Girl very well. And there's an incredibly powerful build-up on a lot of this record, like on How to Disappear, which has this great emotional build into the climax of the chorus. This album is just... It floored me by how much of a step up it was from even the records of hers that I think are okay. I think that even though I liked albums like Lust for Life, I still think this is even like a higher notch above that. It's just consistent. The catchiness is still there. She even made me like Sublime, like a Sublime song, which I guess is fitting with the aesthetic on this. It's very California in a lush sort of way, but it's a side of California that I think is better portrayed here than in a lot of artists that are doing it. This solidified why Lana is one of the best doing this sound, and I dig this. I dig these sad girl vibes. I think this is a better sad girl record than her earlier work. I think that the romanticized ideas in it feel more grounded in a reality, which is one of the things I like about it. And I'm giving it an 8. It's a great record. It's a very, very good record. It's catchy when it needs to be. It's experimental in its own way. And I dig it. I dig this thing a lot. I'm impressed with just the sheer determination of Sturgill Simpson. You know, in spite of having some serious damage done to his vocal cords and having to go through surgery, the long recovery process he seemingly had, and the fact that this record was kind of made amidst all of that is respectful on its own, but I adore the fuck out of Sound and Fury. You know, while it kind of strays farther from the country side that was seen on A Sailor's Guide to Earth, which was a record that I honestly really enjoyed. I know I don't talk about country much because it's not a genre I holistically love by large. There are still records that come out within it that I do enjoy, and A Sailor's Guide to Earth is a great example of somebody who sticks to country's roots without completely burying themselves in the idiosyncrasies that I personally take issue with in a lot of contemporary country. It still had follies that fell in those traps, but it wasn't, by and large, enwrapped in them. But I like that Sound and Fury is something completely different. I honestly like it more than A Sailor's Guide to Earth because of that, because again, I'm not much of a country guy. I do like the blues riffage on here, and I think that this does a good job at melding this kind of blues rock, ZZ Top infused this style with the aesthetic of like 80s synth worship via the eyes of John Carpenter, and throwing in a dash of weird concept on top of that. You know, I haven't seen the short film that coincides with this, but it makes sense that this was written while Sturgill was recovering, going through the kind of recovery he was going through, because this is a weird fucking record. But I do like weird when it's done like this. You know, there's a clear presence of scope from second one. Ronan has this kind of theatrical aspect to it that carries throughout the record, but it bleeds into Remember to Breathe really well, that has this kind of stomping blues riff that Sturgill does his thing over. I think Sturgill's voice suits this sound. His voice sounds really gritty and rugged here, but it fits the kind of rough and tumble aesthetic that the album goes for. You know, I like the riffage on Remember to Breathe and the stomping nature of Sing Along. I love the track Best Clockmaker on Mars. Again, it kind of ties into the weird soundscape and ideas sonically that the album is aiming for. And this feels like a very fully realized project. While A Sailor's Guide to Earth had that in smaller doses, this feels like a much more fully realized project to me personally. I adore this thing. I like it a lot. And I've been meaning to watch the short film because it's got to be bonkers, man. And this is a weird-ass record, and I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I love the melding of blues and horror synth, or like progressive electronic. It's wholly up my alley in ways I wasn't expecting, and this is a fun record. Sure, it has its follies. You know, I've listened to the deluxe edition. It feels a little lengthy. But the 10 songs that are here work. I like it a lot. It's going to be on my Of the Year list somewhere. I just don't know where. I'm giving this an 8. I think it's really fun. If you like The Sailor's Guide to Earth, but you wanted something a little more rugged or rock-centric, or if you like bands like ZZ Top or other southern rock bands like, I don't want to say like Lynyrd Skynyrd, but other bands from that kind of Texas southern rock, you'll like Sound and Fury. It's a fun, weird record. Crash actually played the next 2 records for me on the drive back from North Carolina, and I was enamored with both of them. But Muna was the first one we checked out, and out of the 2, spoilers, is the one that I liked just a little bit more. Muna Saves the World is a really heartfelt, incredibly well-constructed synth pop record that has a large dose of sincerity in its writing. You know, while there is a lot of glitz and sheen on these synth tones, they're very icy and cold when they need to be. You know, and there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheekness to some of the writing as well. I think the opener on the record, Grow, is a great showcase of what the record isn't going to be, but it bleeds really well. It showcases a sense of heart before giving you some great kind of commentary with Number One Fan, which is a very stark response to negative critics and stuff like that. But the record has a lot of earnestness in it as well. Like, Navy Blue more feels like a lot of the same sentiments that are in the song Grow, and shows growth and reflection on, I don't want to say romantic life, but there is a sense of forlornness in the lyrics and in the delivery vocally. But a lot of this album is tight, it's catchy, there's a lot of good hook work, and there's a great sense of melody throughout this entire thing. Tegan and Sarah endorsed these guys, and that's how Crash got into them, and that's how I, by proxy, got into them, was through Crash. And it makes sense why Tegan and Sarah would back these guys, especially given Tegan and Sarah's recent output, not their newest record, but their more recent output. It's very synthy, it's very emotional, there's a lot of emotional potency here. If you like the Black Queen, Fever Daydream, or their follow-up record, you would like this a lot. It's got a lot of similar vibes. Or if you liked Pale Waves' last record, you'll enjoy this as well. It's not so much leaning on the more 1975 aesthetic, it's more just really shimmery synths with an icy touch, with a lot of personal feeling lyrics that aren't afraid to get tongue-in-cheek. I'm giving this an 8. It's a lot of fun in that sort of cold, dancey sort of way. Great recommendation from Crash. Thank you for showing me that. And thank you for also showing me When I'm Not Getting Dinner. I don't know know much about the Imbruglia line outside of Natalie's Torn, but her younger sister Laura has some pretty nice musical chops. At least this is what Scared of You is giving me, which is the other record that, again, Crash showed me on the drive back from North Carolina. And after sitting with this thing, I like this thing a lot. Like I said, I don't like it as much as Saves the World, but it's not too far down the totem pole to me personally. I also like a lot of the edge that coats this thing. It's not a synth pop record. This is more of just a rock tinge, sort of almost punk at points album that sees Laura also biting with her lyricism, like on Give Boys Pink Toys or Your Shit. But it also isn't afraid to be reflective in its own way, like on Now I'm Mum or Carry You Around. This is a tight-ass record that has a lot of bite, has a good dose of energy, and has a great voice in front of it. Laura has a fantastic sense of harnessing her voice. Like, on Now I'm Mum, she has this great moment where she kind of harmonizes with herself, and it is beautiful. There is a lot of beauty to be seen with the edginess on here, and I like it a lot. I think it's a solid-ass record. It's more of kind of an aesthetic preference to me personally. I dig the sounds on here. The production is a little kind of normal at points. It's a little kind of atypical of its style. And I don't knock it too much for that, but it's not as bold as, say, an Otoboke Beaver is if we're talking about edgier, harsher punk stuff, or like Idols. It kind of treads that kind of normal realm in like a rock sense. But it's not bad because of it. It's just, again, if I'm going to be grading it in my own proverbial palette spectrum, this is a great record. It's a solid record, but I've revisited other records more than this that are in a similar vein. I feel like if you like rock music with a little more of an edge lyrically, a little more of a snarkiness lyrically, you would enjoy Scared of You. It has a lot of earnestness and a lot of heart, but also a lot of brashness in a tongue-in-cheek sort of way. And it's fun. I'm giving this a 7. This is a really solid record, and it is definitely worth your time if you like that stuff. You'll get a kick out of this for sure. And actually, if you liked the Sunflower Bean EP, King of the Dudes, that came out earlier this year, then you'll also like this album. It has a similar type of rock swagger to it. I just think that the writing also has its more serious tendencies that sets it apart from that.
And the heart is a cable jumper, the brain is flipping the language, the lungs are proud.
Now, if there's one album you guys are sure to know that I've been excited for, it is Clipping's There Existed an Addiction to Blood. I love Clipping. I love Daveed Diggs. I love the noises these guys pull together. Face was my song of the year last year, and it's another one of those anticipated records of the year. And it comes through full force with taking a lot of the world building and conceptual nature seen on Splendor and Misery and injecting a lot of the same sort of writing and style that existed on their first couple of releases. This is an impeccable fucking record. And it is a horrorcore album, but not in the same way that like Isham or Brother Lynch Hung writes horrorcore, or Necro. It doesn't have that same kind of production style that exists on those records. It is still very much production-wise a Clipping record. It just has a love and adoration for horror and soundtracks to horror films. I mean, Nothing Is Safe, I reviewed it for the channel, has a very John Carpenter-esque piano line that lingers throughout the whole song, that builds, that has a synth line that builds on top of it that still feels very Carpenter-esque. La Minna Orda is this really grimy, noisy fucking song that just gets noisier by the end of it. He Dead has this sense of dread coded in the instrumental that is also rings true on Club Down. Run For Your Life has this really interesting way that the production works and how the beat kind of ebbs and flows out of existence. This is an incredible fucking record. One of the best albums of the year, bar none. I love that they made a story song for this record, but like on Splendor and Misery, they made it fit into the sounds and lyrical concepts that the record ties into, because this ties into other characters from other stories, but it has that horror twist, and it is very much a Halloween record, and it's one that I'll be spinning in the Octobers to come, because, I mean, this is such a cool fucking record. I mean, if I were to give any complaints, I think the weakest song that isn't an interlude is The Show. You know, yes, piano burning is a little self-indulgent, but I think it's cool. I think it's cool they were just like, let's end the album with a piano on fire. I like that aesthetic. I think it's dope. But The Show might be the weakest song on the album, and that's not saying much because it's also an amazing song with a really cool beat, and David's flow on it is just snappy as usual. This is maybe not album of the year, like top, but it's like top 10. This is a top 10 record for sure. You can guarantee that. I'm giving it a 9, if only because while I like the interludes and I like that they're keeping this horror aesthetic, I was hoping for a narrative record like Splendor and Misery. Splendor and Misery has a clear narrative to it. Its Follies more have to do with some of the interludes. This Follies is that while it has an overall aesthetic concept, it doesn't have a story-driven concept that I was hoping this record would have. But still, that is a minor knock on a pretty much perfect record. If you haven't listened to it yet and you love clipping, if you love industrial music, if you love anything like that, listen to There Exists an Addiction of Blood. It is a masterclass in making horrifying sounding music, great hip-hop, and noisy hip-hop. This thing is so fucking good.
God's faithfulness, and it shows just how much.
On the other side of that coin, Kanye West made objectively his worst album ever with Jesus is King. I know this, like any Kanye album, is going to have its defenders, but I feel like the defenders have just such a poor leg to stand on. And I know I'm a guy with weird opinions on Kanye records, but I feel safe in saying that because this is just a rough listen. Like, I know that, not even just from a production standpoint, because there's some mixing issues that happen that I know Kanye's fixing, but it's not gonna fix a lot of the core issues that this record has. Kanye himself made Jesus Walks early on in his career, and made Late Registration shortly after that. This feels like such a disheartened attempt at trying to recapture the same glory that he had in those earlier records. That's not to say that there aren't good things about this album, shockingly enough. I like the production on the first 3 songs. I think that the choir usage on the first song in particular is really nice. I love the idea of a song like Follow God that he tries to carry through on God, but neither of them come through well because he's still having a hard time tapering back the ego that he's had on full display throughout this entire decade. You know, Kanye's been at the most self-indulgent rapper this entire decade, and because of that, he's having a hard time not flexing about Forbes mentions or talking about how he sells his merch for a high dollar amount, you know, and he tries to spin that into a sort of Christian sentiment, but it doesn't work. It sounds more evangelical than it does actually Christian, you know. And like I've said time and time again, there is a glimpse of genius on every Kanye record. Even the records of his I hate, there's at least one song that fully comes together and feels well realized. And on this, it's Use This Gospel, which not only has an incredible beat, it has an amazing solo from Kenny G, and has clips back together. And I love the verses from Pusha and his brother, especially his brother, who talks a lot about becoming a Christian rapper, which is ironic given that it's on Jesus is King. You know, this could have been good. I'm not gonna lie, it could have been. Because even though Kanye is swept up in this really BS political stance that he's rocking, that feels contradictory to where he was when he was making this type of music, given how on the nose Kanye's last couple of records have been on reflecting his mindset, it's not surprising this didn't work because I don't buy into Kanye becoming a born-again Christian. If he actually had been, this would have been a much more interesting release. Instead, it's just shitty. 3 out of 10, because some of the production's good, and Use This Gospel is actually an amazing song.
Turn me right into a paraplegic pair of shoes. I got the MB on them, make it snares.
Confetti, The next album on the docket was a request by Tyler. Shout out to Tyler from the weird videos I make where we talk about games and stuff. This is an artist that I'm not familiar with, but after listening to it, it honestly reminded me a lot of Joey Purp's last record, Quarter Thing, that I reviewed on the channel. This is a very solid hip-hop release that has a lot of the same issues I had with Quarter Thing, meaning that it feels very indebted to his roots in an almost derivative way. Where this record shines is when Jack pulls together a decent song that feels distant from anything he might take influence from. It's clear listening to even to those songs that he has a definite, at least, affinity for Brockhampton, because songs like Going Back Down and River Road have that sort of same edge that Brockhampton Saturation era records did, but there's also a bit of a distinction between that in his own way. I think some of his bars are nice on here. I think some of the hooks on here are nice. I like tracks like Big Chillin' and Ice. I like Walk in the Park as well. This record, by and large, just feels... It gets a little milquetoasty at points. Some of the production on even the songs that I do like feels a little bland. Jack is really the shining moment on those songs, on some of those songs, more so than the production. But this is a solid hip-hop release. Jack clearly knows how to write a good hook and write some nice bars. And I think that if you enjoy sort of the contemporary rapscape, if you like some pseudo-bright trap with some nice flavors that feel sort of distant from a lot of trends people are doing without straying too far from them, you'll like Confetti. It's got some good moments. It's got some dazzle. But like Confetti, it kind of falls away pretty quick and kind of leaves a mess on the floor. I think the songs that are weakest to me are the ones that dip into those contemporary trends a little too heavy-handedly, like Warsaw and Walk in the Park. They're not terrible, but they're a lot more on the mediocre side of things than the ones that shine, that have nice, lush production, that pairs the trap beats well with some nice synth lines that Jack isn't just crooning his own auto-tune stuff over. But I walked away liking this thing, more so than hating it. I think it's really solid. I'm giving it a 6. It's not bad. Thank you, Tyler, for the suggestion. I'm sure you like it at least a little more than I do, but I think you could do far worse for this genre and this style than Jack Harlow. I think, anyway, personally. The last record I'm talking about this month was another request by Random Rock and Red Wrestling Reviews. It is Puppy's album, The Goat, which he said was an album perfect for the season of the time, which was late October, Halloween season. And I would agree. This has got some spooky ideas in its lyrics, and like the newest Opeth, it reminded me a lot of Ghost, especially with the vocals, but I honestly like this a little more than the newest Opeth. While the newest Opeth was bogged in the newest Opeth's own issues, or modern Opeth's issues, the issues I have with this more have to do with the production and the musicianship on some songs. I hate the opener, Black Hole. I hate the riff on it. I hate that it just sounds like a cock rock tune, and it bothers me. I hate that sound. Anything with that sound, I'm probably not going to like it, because it's bland, it's played out, it's really mediocre. But I do like a lot of the sinisterness seen on songs like Vengeance. I love the almost heavier, or the almost metal tendencies on tracks like Entombed. I love the bass on World Stand Still. I love the imagery painted on Bathed in Blood and Nightwalker. I like the kind of unsettling soothingness of I Feel in Evil. This record is fine. This record is really solid. It, across the board, has kind of production issues to me. It's a little too kind of normal. It's a little too contemporary for my tastes, personally. It almost feels like a bogged-down version of the newest Boston Manor, and I feel like it's also because there's a clash between the production style and how the guitars sound and the vocals. I think what makes Ghost work is that they are produced in a way where they stay heavy, but their vocals don't feel neutered by that. This, the production, I feel like neuters the vocals. There's some real power behind that delivery and that style. And again, on the moments like Nightwalker and Bathe in Blood, I feel like it works. But across the board, I don't think it's as consistent at working. It's a nice record, though. It does evoke good things for the Halloween season. I feel like if you like rock with a little bit of a spooky edge and you want more of that this year, or if you want a good taste of that you might have missed from this year, listen to the GOAT. It's not terrible. It's solid enough. My issues with it more are on a personal level than on a may not necessarily be across the board level. That's why I'm giving it a 6. It's fine. It's inoffensive in that aspect, but I feel like some might like it a lot more than me because of your own tastes. Let that be kind of my own disclaimer to it. But personally, I'm feeling like a 6. I think it's good. I think it's solid enough. It got me in the spirit a little more, and I like some of the musicianship here. I love the drums on a lot of this record, and the bass. I think the bass on this record is really, really solid. But yeah, that's the month. That's what I thought of the records I listened to this month. What have you been listening to? Is there something I haven't talked about this year that you would like for me to? Link in the description is the listening log if you'd like to request something. I am going to be doing a lot of catch-up, and you'll be hearing a lot more of my opinions on records in the next couple of months as I gear up for the end of the year. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, be sure to like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to the patrons. Link to the description of my Patreon. If you'd like to join their ranks, feel free to do so. I'm going to get out of here, though. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, have situations, and I'll see you another day.